Mao Zedong, later known as Chairman Mao, was born on December 26, 1893, in Shaoshan village, located in the Hunan province of southern China. His family background played a significant role in shaping his early life. Mao's father, Mao Zedong, was born into a poor peasant family, but worked hard to change his circumstances. After spending a few years in the Xiang army during his youth, Zedong returned home and began farming. Over time, he earned enough money to become a small lender, combining this work with his farming activities. His efforts made him one of the wealthier farmers in Shaoshan, where he eventually owned about 20 acres of land. Mao's mother, Wen Kuai-mei, had a difficult upbringing. Her father was a shoemaker who struggled with heavy drinking, and her mother was his concubine. Wen was a devout Buddhist, and her gentle nature stood in contrast to Mao's father, who was strict and often harsh with his children. Mao grew up with 3 siblings and faced frequent beatings from his father. His mother tried to protect the children from their father's temper, but her efforts had limited success. In his early years, Mao was drawn to his mother's Buddhist beliefs, but eventually lost interest in religion. At the age of 8, Mao started attending primary school in Shaoshan. His education blended traditional Chinese teachings rooted in Confucianism with growing influences from the Western world. By the time he was 13, Mao's life took a dramatic turn when his father arranged a marriage for him. Mao refused to comply with the arranged marriage, showcasing his rebellious nature from an early age. This defiance created tensions within his family, but marked the beginning of his independent thinking. Mao Zedong grew up during a period of significant change and turmoil in China's history. By the time he was born in 1893, China had been ruled for nearly 300 years by the Qing dynasty. The Qing government maintained a conservative approach, adhering to centuries-old traditions and systems of governance. However, this approach left China isolated and unprepared to face the rapidly modernizing world. During the mid-1800s, China faced growing pressure from Western powers. The Opium Wars, fought between China and Britain from 1839 to 1842, and again from 1856 to 1860, forced China to open its borders and trade under humiliating terms. This marked the beginning of a series of unequal treaties that left the nation vulnerable to foreign influence and exploitation. The influx of Western ideas, technologies, and political systems began to challenge China's traditional ways. By the late 19th century, revolutionary ideas were spreading among China's intellectuals and reformers. They were inspired by the changes in Western nations, where monarchies had been replaced by republics or constitutional governments. These movements raised questions about why China was still ruled by an emperor and a rigid imperial system. Ideas such as democracy, socialism, and communism began to take root, offering new paths for a modern China. At the same time, China faced internal unrest and regional famines that further weakened the Qing dynasty. Secret societies and uprisings, such as the Taiping and Boxer rebellions, demonstrated the growing dissatisfaction among the Chinese people. As Mao entered his teenage years, he witnessed these struggles firsthand, sparking his early interest in political change and reform. Mao Zedong's education and early exposure to political ideas laid the foundation for his later involvement in China's revolutionary movement. At the age of 8, Mao began his formal education at a primary school in Shaoshan, where he was introduced to traditional Chinese teachings rooted in Confucianism. However, by the early 1900s, Western influences began to seep into the curriculum, exposing Mao to a broader world of ideas and concepts. As a teenager, Mao developed an interest in history and politics. His reading included works by prominent thinkers who criticized the outdated imperial system and called for reform. During this time, Mao also defied societal expectations when he refused to honor an arranged marriage set up by his father at the age of 13. This act of rebellion caused a stir in his village, but highlighted his independent nature and unwillingness to conform. In 1911, Mao witnessed one of the most pivotal moments in China's history, the fall of the Qing dynasty. The revolution led by reformers and military leaders resulted in the abdication of the last emperor and the establishment of the Republic of China. Inspired by these events, Mao joined the rebel army as an 18-year-old recruit. Although his involvement was brief, it marked his entry into political activism. After the revolution, Mao returned to school and decided to pursue teaching. He enrolled in the First Normal School of Hunan, one of the most prestigious institutions in the region. During his time there, Mao excelled as a student, immersing himself in literature, history, and political philosophy. He was elected secretary of the Student Society and began forming connections with like-minded peers, fostering his growing interest in socialism and communism. Mao Zedong's time as a student and young adult marked the development of his ideological beliefs and his first steps toward communism. While studying at the First Normal School of Hunan, Mao became increasingly interested in political theories and social change. His exposure to the works of prominent thinkers like Sun Yat-sen, who advocated for a republican government, and Karl Marx, whose ideas on communism proposed radical societal transformation, had a profound impact on him. The early 1910 and 1920 were a period of political turbulence in China. The fall of the Qing dynasty in 1912 and the establishment of the Republic of China had not brought the stability many hoped for. Regional warlords, internal conflicts, and weak central governance created widespread discontent. Mao, observing these struggles, began to see the potential for Marxist principles to address China's issues. In 1917, Mao moved to Beijing to work as a library assistant at Peking University. Here, he was mentored by Yang Changji, one of his former teachers, who introduced him to intellectual circles. While working at the university, Mao encountered other young activists and scholars who shared his growing interest in socialism and communism. This exposure deepened his understanding of Marxism and strengthened his resolve to create change in China. By the summer of 1921, Mao's ideological transformation was complete. He attended the First Congress of the Communist Party of China, marking his official commitment to the communist cause. During this time, Mao also began organizing student protests and writing political essays advocating for equality and revolution. His passion for mobilizing the masses and his belief in the potential of China's peasantry as a revolutionary force became the cornerstone of his political strategy. The Long March was a defining event in Mao Zedong's rise to leadership within the Communist Party of China. By the early 1930s, Mao had established himself as a key figure in the communist movement, leading the creation of a revolutionary base in Jiangxi province. This region, known as the Jiangxi Soviet, became a stronghold for communist activities, but it also attracted the attention of the nationalist government under Chiang Kai-shek, who launched several military campaigns to eliminate the communists. In 1934, facing encirclement by nationalist forces, Mao and the Red Army made the bold decision to break out of Jiangxi and embark on a massive retreat. Known as the Long March, this journey covered over 6,000 miles across some of China's most challenging terrains, including mountains, rivers, and swamps. The Red Army, numbering around 86,000 at the start, endured relentless attacks, starvation, and harsh weather conditions. By the end of the march, only about 4,000 had survived. Despite the hardships, the Long March became a symbol of resilience and determination for the communist movement. It also solidified Mao's leadership. During the march, he demonstrated strategic brilliance and the ability to inspire loyalty among his followers. Mao's emphasis on guerrilla warfare and his focus on mobilizing the peasantry as a revolutionary force distinguished him from other leaders in the Communist Party. By the time the march ended in 1935, Mao had emerged as the undisputed leader of the Chinese Communist Party. His leadership during this difficult period laid the groundwork for the eventual communist victory in China's Civil War and established his reputation as a revolutionary hero. The Second Sino-Japanese War, which began in 1937, was a pivotal chapter in Mao Zedong's rise to prominence and the growth of the Communist Party. When Japan invaded China, tensions between Mao's communist forces and Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist government temporarily eased, leading to a fragile alliance to resist the common enemy. This period allowed Mao and the Communists to expand their influence while contributing to the war effort. As the leader of the Red Army, Mao focused on guerrilla warfare tactics to combat the Japanese forces. Instead of engaging in direct battles, which often favored the well-equipped Japanese military, the Communists disrupted supply lines and launched surprise attacks. These strategies not only weakened the Japanese, but also demonstrated the effectiveness of Mao's leadership and the adaptability of the Red Army. During the war, the Communists gained significant support from the Chinese peasantry. Mao emphasized the importance of winning over rural populations by addressing their needs and grievances. This approach helped solidify the Communist Party's base, expanding its influence across large areas of China. By 1940, Mao's forces achieved a notable victory during the 100 Regiments Campaign, a series of coordinated attacks on Japanese-controlled railways and supply routes. Although the campaign came at a high cost, it showcased the growing strength of the Communist forces. The war also provided Mao with an opportunity to refine his vision for a communist China. By 1945, the Red Army had grown to nearly 500,000 soldiers, and Mao's leadership had become synonymous with the fight for China's independence. The end of the war set the stage for the resumption of the Chinese Civil War, with Mao's Communist Party better positioned than ever to challenge the nationalists for control of the country. After the Second Sino-Japanese War ended in 1945, the fragile alliance between Mao Zedong's Communists and Chiang Kai-shek's Nationalists dissolved, reigniting the Chinese Civil War. By this time, Mao and the Communist Party were in a much stronger position, thanks to their growing army and widespread support among the rural population. The Nationalists, although still in control of most of China, faced internal corruption and declining morale, further weakening their hold on the country. The war intensified in 1946, with the Communists launching a series of strategic campaigns. One of their key advantages was their effective use of guerrilla tactics, combined with Mao's focus on mobilizing the peasantry. This approach allowed the Communists to capture vital territories, including regions in northern and central China. The turning point came in 1948 during the Huaihai Campaign, where the Communist forces achieved a decisive victory, securing control of large areas in eastern China. In early 1949, Mao's Red Army launched an offensive south of the Yangtze River, capturing key cities, including Nanjing, the nationalist capital. Chiang Kai-shek and the remaining nationalist forces retreated to the island of Taiwan, where they established a government in exile. On October 1, 1949, Mao Zedong declared the founding of the People's Republic of China from Beijing's Tiananmen Square. This marked the culmination of years of struggle and the establishment of communist rule in mainland China. The victory was not only a testament to Mao's leadership, but also a reflection of the Communist Party's ability to adapt and respond to China's changing political and social landscape. The founding of the People's Republic symbolized the end of decades of internal conflict and the beginning of a new era for China under Mao's rule. After declaring the founding of the People's Republic of China on October 1, 1949, Mao Zedong began shaping the new communist state. The early years of the People's Republic were marked by sweeping political and social reforms aimed at consolidating communist rule and transforming the nation. Mao and the Communist Party sought to stabilize the country after decades of civil war, foreign invasions, and internal turmoil. One of Mao's first initiatives was land reform. Large estates owned by landlords were seized and redistributed to poor peasants. This campaign was accompanied by violent class struggles, during which many landlords were publicly tried and executed. The redistribution of land aimed to address deep-rooted economic inequalities and win support from the rural population, which made up the majority of China's populace. Mao also targeted the remnants of the old regime and perceived enemies of the state. Counter-revolutionaries, former nationalist supporters, and alleged spies were arrested, and many were executed or sent to labor camps. These purges were part of Mao's broader effort to eliminate opposition and consolidate his authority. At the same time, the government launched efforts to modernize the economy and society. A significant focus was placed on eliminating opium addiction, improving public health, and increasing literacy rates. Campaigns were organized to educate the population and mobilize them for the new communist vision. China's involvement in the Korean War 1950–1953 also defined these early years. Mao's decision to send troops in support of North Korea solidified China's position as a global communist power, but further strained relations with the West, particularly the United States. These reforms and actions set the stage for Mao's ambitious plans to transform China, but they also revealed the challenges of governing such a vast and diverse nation. In 1958, Mao Zedong launched the Great Leap Forward, an ambitious campaign aimed at rapidly transforming China's economy from an agrarian society into an industrialized communist state. The initiative was part of Mao's second five-year plan and sought to surpass Western powers like Britain in industrial output. Central to this vision were dramatic increases in grain and steel production, achieved through mass mobilization and collectivization. To meet these goals, Mao's government merged small farms into large collective communes where people worked together under strict quotas. The state also promoted the construction of backyard furnaces to produce steel, with ordinary citizens melting down metal objects in their homes to contribute to industrial output. However, many of these measures were poorly planned and lacked the necessary technical expertise, leading to widespread inefficiencies and wasted resources. The push for rapid industrialization came at a high cost. Farmers were diverted from agricultural work, and experimental farming methods further disrupted food production. Despite declining grain yields, local officials, eager to report successes, exaggerated production figures. This misinformation led the government to export grain and maintain high quotas, leaving rural communities without enough food. The consequences were catastrophic. Between 1959 and 1961, China experienced one of the deadliest famines in history, with estimates of deaths ranging from 25 to 55 million people. Starvation and suffering were widespread, and the social fabric of many communities was shattered. The failure of the Great Leap Forward weakened Mao's political standing. By 1962, the campaign was abandoned, and power within the Communist Party shifted to leaders like Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping, who sought to stabilize the economy. However, Mao remained determined to maintain control and would later launch the Cultural Revolution to reassert his authority. In 1966, Mao Zedong launched the Cultural Revolution, a decade-long political and social movement aimed at preserving communist ideology and eliminating perceived capitalist and traditional elements within Chinese society. Officially called the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution, it was Mao's attempt to reassert his authority after the failures of the Great Leap Forward and growing opposition within the Communist Party. Mao called on China's youth to bombard the headquarters and overthrow the four old ideas, old customs, old habits, and old culture. Students and young activists formed groups called Red Guards who carried out Mao's directives with fervor. They attacked teachers, intellectuals, and government officials accused of being counter-revolutionaries. Monuments and artifacts representing China's traditional culture were destroyed, and public life was consumed by revolutionary zeal. The violence and chaos spread rapidly. Factories, schools, and government offices were disrupted as workers and students engaged in ideological struggles. Mao used the Cultural Revolution to purge his rivals within the Communist Party, including Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping, who were accused of promoting capitalist tendencies. These purges solidified Mao's control but caused immense political and social instability. By 1968, the Red Guard's radicalism became difficult to manage, and Mao ordered the military to restore order. Millions of urban youth were sent to rural areas in a campaign called Down to the Countryside to Learn from the Peasants. This marked the beginning of the movement's decline, although sporadic violence and purges continued into the early 1970s. The Cultural Revolution left a lasting impact on Chinese society. An estimated 500,000 to 2 million people lost their lives, and countless others were persecuted. While it solidified Mao's dominance, it also left a scarred and divided nation struggling to recover from the turmoil. Mao Zedong's later years were marked by significant events in both domestic politics and international relations. By the 1970s, Mao's health was failing due to heart and lung issues, but his influence over Chinese politics persisted. During this time, he relied heavily on the Gang of Four, a faction led by his wife, Jiang Qing, to uphold his radical policies. This group played a central role in continuing the legacy of the Cultural Revolution, even as the nation began to experience internal divisions. Internationally, Mao achieved a groundbreaking moment in 1972 when U.S. President Richard Nixon visited China. This meeting symbolized a major shift in global politics, ending years of isolation between the two nations. The visit was driven by strategic goals, as both countries sought to counterbalance the growing power of the Soviet Union. The normalization of Sino-American relations positioned China as a key player on the world stage, setting the foundation for future diplomatic and economic cooperation. Domestically, Mao's final years were characterized by a power struggle between his radical supporters, including the Gang of Four and reform-minded leaders like Deng Xiaoping, who advocated for more pragmatic policies. These tensions culminated after Mao's death on September 9, 1976, at the age of 82. While his leadership unified China and established a communist state, his controversial policies, such as the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution, resulted in immense suffering and millions of deaths. Mao remains a divisive figure in history, celebrated by some as a revolutionary hero and criticized by others for his authoritarian rule and catastrophic policies. What are your thoughts on Mao Zedong's legacy? Was he a revolutionary visionary or a leader who caused unnecessary suffering? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more engaging content. Thank you very much for watching.